My name is Marissa Langley. I was 42 the morning they deleted me. Not fired. Deleted. It was 9:03 a.m. when the HR email arrived. No subject line. No meeting invitation. Just a sterile PDF attachment and a single sentence in the body: your role has been impacted by strategic realignment. I read it 3 times. Then once more, aloud. The office around me buzzed on, indifferent. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. The same stale coffee scent hung in the air. No one looked up. I sat there in the finance bullpen, cursor blinking on an empty reply field. No shock. No tears. Just a strange stillness, like hearing silence underwater. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to my desk. My nameplate was still there. A minor cruelty. I packed slowly. Monitor notes. 1 fountain pen. The bronze paperweight Franklin had given me after our Q3 recovery in 2019. To the quiet fixers, the plaque said. I left it. But I slid 1 folder into my briefcase, the one they didn't know I still had. They didn't ask for an exit interview. No handover. No thank you for 12 years of spotless audits and saving them $80 million less than a month ago. Just a badge deactivation and a security escort to the elevator like I was a temp with expired clearance. I remember the sound the doors made when they closed. It wasn't rage I felt. It was restraint. The night before, I had stayed until 11, adjusting yield assumptions for our Latin America exposure, a project I wasn't even required to finish anymore. I had known, in that way animals sense a storm, that something was coming. There were signs, of course. Skipped onions. Reports marked seen but never answered. Franklin, our CEO, stopped making eye contact the way a surgeon avoids meeting the gaze of a patient he won't save. Still, I stayed late. Still delivered. Still solved things no one else could. That's what you do when you've built your career in silence. You perform, even when the spotlight moves on. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why. Because I already knew. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't budget. It was because I was too expensive. Too visible. And maybe, too close to something I wasn't meant to see. There's a kind of loyalty that corporations breed in people like me: quiet, diligent, useful. You learn to take pride not in applause but in absence. No crisis. No scandal. No mess. I once managed to contain a multi-portfolio derivative collapse without a single press mention. Franklin called me on a Sunday. You're the only one who can untangle this without us bleeding on the headlines. I solved it by Tuesday. No thank you. No bonus. Just silence. And I was fine with that. Until they made me disposable. Until they made it clear that no amount of discretion could buy permanence. Caitlin, our junior analyst, was the only one who looked up when I walked out. She blinked at the HR escort, then at me. Confused. Like a child watching her parent get arrested without understanding the words. I smiled. Nodded. Then walked. The subway home was unusually empty. I watched the tunnel lights blur through the glass and thought about all the versions of me still echoing inside that building: the woman who stayed late, who cleaned up other people's messes, who believed competence could protect her. She was gone now. Replaced by someone who had nothing left to lose except the truth. At home, I made tea. Rooibos. No milk. I opened the folder I'd kept offline for 3 years. Backups of every fund I'd ever touched. Every audit note. Every flagged discrepancy that had been waved away by legal or Franklin himself. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was reflex. Working under Franklin teaches you things. Like never assume loyalty from a man who signs your bonus in pencil and your NDA in blood. The folder I took wasn't about the $80 million I saved. It was about the $2.4 million I found while saving it. A single transaction buried inside a shell company that shouldn't have existed. At the time, I thought it was sloppy accounting. Now, I wasn't so sure. Because 2 days after I flagged it internally, I was erased. No explanation. No inquiry. Just a PDF and a silent floor. Franklin once told me I was too visible, said it like a compliment. That was 6 months ago, after I flagged a compliance gap that could have triggered an SEC review. I stayed late that night, rewrote the summary, walked it to legal myself. He brought me coffee the next morning. Smiled. Then said it again. "You're too visible, Marissa." The kind of thing someone says when they've already decided you're a threat and haven't yet figured out how to make you disappear. They figured it out. But they forgot something. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. And deletion isn't the same as disappearance. So I poured another cup of tea, opened a blank document, and wrote one sentence: strategic realignment doesn't cover 2.4 million. Then I opened the file Franklin had told me to delete. And read it again slowly this time. Because some stories don't start with a headline. They start with a whisper. And I was done being silent. I joined Bellington Chase 12 years ago, back when the lobby still smelled like varnish and Franklin was just another rising partner with sharp suits and a sharper smile. I was 30, 2 promotions into a career that had always run on quiet precision. I wasn't flashy. I didn't charm boardrooms. But I could read a fund like a novel, every decimal a plot twist. They hired me to fix things. And I did. Internal controls. Cross-border rollovers. That quarter when a sovereign bond defaulted midweek and the partners nearly called in sick en masse, I patched it before the damage hit daylight. No headlines. No panic. Just a well-done email and another stack of files. I didn't mind. At the time, I believed in the machine. Not the people, but the process, the idea that if you kept the gears running, you earned your place inside them. I never asked for visibility. Never played politics. I just solved problems, cleaned messes, and quietly made others look good. Especially Franklin. He rose fast. And when he needed someone discreet, dependable, and invisible, he called me. I became his fixer. Not officially. But the pattern was clear. And for a while, it felt like trust. I remember one winter 2016. A strategic partner went under mid-quarter. Investors were circling like sharks. Franklin called me Sunday morning. No preamble. "You're the only one who can unwind this without making us look exposed." That was his version of please. I worked 3 nights straight. Built a backchannel recap strategy, buried the risk inside a neutral entity, and wrote the external memo myself. By Thursday, the markets calmed. Franklin didn't say thank you. Instead, he handed me a lavender folder marked preliminary. No context. Just numbers. "Don't let this leak," he said. I didn't ask what it was. I just ran the math. That folder became a pattern. Problems passed to me under the table, too sensitive for committees, too complicated for juniors. I didn't mind. I liked being useful. Necessary. What I didn't realize was that necessity has a shelf life. The shift didn't come all at once. It started small. A skipped calendar invite. A board memo I used to review now finalized without my eyes. Franklin stopped looping me into deal flow, not because the deals changed, but because something else had. I had started noticing. Not mistakes. Patterns. Misaligned timestamps. Vague invoice memos. Transfers approved twice, once by finance, once quietly resigned by legal. I flagged them. Discreetly. Never accusatory. Just notes. Most got ignored. Some disappeared entirely. The first time it happened, I thought it was a sync error. A draft risk memo I'd authored redlined, then gone. replaced by a sanitized version that removed the advisory payment anomalies I had raised. I asked legal. They blamed formatting. I asked compliance. They never replied. So I stopped asking. But I kept copies. Not because I expected fallout. But because something inside me had shifted, not fear, just the quiet awareness that I might be on borrowed time. Franklin never raised his voice. That wasn't his style. He edited. He deleted. You didn't fall out with Franklin, you faded. Invitations stopped. Your name vanished from slide decks. Your successes were retold with new protagonists. And still, I stayed. Because some of us are conditioned to finish the work even when the room is already being cleaned behind us. The last 6 months were the clearest blur I've ever lived. I saved them 80 million traced to misclassified asset cluster through 3 continents and 2 shadow audits. It took me 76 hours. They clapped. Franklin leaned over and said, "You just saved our quarter." 2 days later, I was gone. Not demoted. Not transferred. Erased. And in that erasure, I saw the truth I'd avoided for too long. I wasn't too expensive. I was too dangerous. Because the longer I stayed, the more I saw. And they needed blind loyalty. Not memory. I think about that often now, the way a system thanks you with silence, then punishes you for remembering it too clearly. But I do remember. Every folder. Every edit. Every missing comma in an invoice that wasn't supposed to exist. That's the thing about working in shadows. Eventually, you learn to see in the dark. It started with a typo. A single date off by 1 day buried inside a quarterly rollover file for the Latin America Fund. I was reviewing the packet for continuity before locking the quarter, something I used to delegate but had started doing myself again. Not out of control, but caution. The number wasn't wrong. The context was. A rollover from a short-term fixed income tranche had cleared on a Tuesday, but the upstream allocation it replaced was marked Wednesday. Impossible. The money moved before the authorization. At first, I thought it was clerical. I flagged it, annotated the PDF, and cross-checked the transaction logs. That's when I saw it. The approval trail led to a consulting entity I didn't recognize, Faraday Consults LLC. An unfamiliar vendor name in a file I had cleaned 10 times. I pulled the invoice. 1 line item. Advisory retainer Q4 $2,400,000. No scope. No terms. Just a payment, approved by Franklin, routed from our discretionary fund into a Delaware-registered shell with no employees, no website, and 1 account matched to a Cayman trust. And the listed contact? Emma Pierce. Franklin's daughter. 23. No certifications. No advisory background. LinkedIn listed her as an aspiring wellness entrepreneur. I sat back in my chair, eyes burning from too many hours in front of spreadsheets, and let the shape of it settle. This wasn't just sloppiness. It was architecture. The kind of mistake that isn't accidental, it's masked. In the days that followed, I moved carefully. I revisited our past disbursement logs. Exported old versions from my personal offline backups. I'd kept them mostly for cross-referencing, not suspicion. But now they became something else, a breadcrumb trail. 1 payment became 2. The second, Hawthorne Ridge Holdings, a Nevada-registered private trust. $870,000, same fund. Same quarter. Labeled Contractual Advisory International Realignment. There was no realignment. That was my portfolio. I would have known. The name Hawthorne Ridge stuck because I'd heard it before. Years ago, a junior in legal flagged a payment to the same trust. She called it out during a compliance memo review. Her concern never made the final document. 2 weeks later, she was transferred without explanation. She cried in the bathroom on her last day. I remember because she said something that didn't make sense until now. Watch your blind spots. They come from above. Over the next week, I mapped the network. 37 transfers. 2 years. Each under 3 million, each marked as a consulting retainer or strategic advisory. All routed through 5 entities, 3 private trusts, and 1 charitable foundation with no board, no projects, and 1 bank account. Some went through Delaware. Some through Nevada. One used an address that I knew for a fact was a WeWork. None had legitimate advisory records. No scopes. No minutes. No deliverables. Just Franklin's name, quietly embedded in every approval chain. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was scared. Because I knew what fear looked like. And this wasn't fear. It was precision. I created a secure drive. Version controlled. Hash verified. Duplicated onto 2 encrypted USBs and hidden separately, one in my apartment, the other inside the lining of a cosmetic case I never traveled without. I documented everything. Timestamps. Sign-offs. Routing metadata. I didn't know what I would do with it yet. But I knew I couldn't unknow it. And more dangerously, Franklin couldn't afford me to keep knowing it. 3 days later, I received a revised version of the quarterly report I'd helped compile. The advisory payment to Faraday Consults was missing. The disbursement field replaced with a line item labeled discretionary pool reconciled. The metadata showed it had been edited at 11:47 p.m. Sunday. By a system admin. I checked the login credentials. Sophie Langston. A junior legal assistant. Quiet. Diligent. Known for precision, she once flagged a decimal error in a footnote on a 200-page audit. She didn't miss things. She didn't override reports. Unless someone told her to. Or unless she was trying to save something. I searched her name. No longer on the company directory. Terminated. 3 weeks ago. No explanation. Just gone. No exit memo. No handover. No trace. Like she'd never been there. Like me almost. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a legal pad. Wrote 3 names: Faraday Consults, Hawthorne Ridge, Emma Pierce, then underneath whistleblower protection. The question wasn't rhetorical. It was tactical. I had friends from grad school, people who now worked inside agencies I used to reference only for compliance training. I called one. Pitched a hypothetical. Kept names out. He didn't blink. If discretionary investor funds are being routed into executive-controlled entities, that's not just unethical. It's wire fraud. Securities fraud if the vehicles are regulated, and if any edits were made to obscure it, you're in obstruction territory. I didn't sleep that night. But not from panic. From clarity. I wasn't being paranoid. I was seeing the system exactly as it had been built. And it was cracking. 2 days later, I received a call from an unknown DC number. No voicemail. Then another. This time, it left a message. Ms. Langley, this is Catherine Monroe from the Securities and Exchange Commission. We've received an anonymous inquiry referencing your name and recent employment with Bellington Chase. I froze. Anonymous inquiry. Not complaint. Not tip. A signal. Someone else had spoken. It wasn't me. But now, I wasn't alone. That changed everything. Because Franklin's power wasn't in intimidation. It was in isolation. He didn't threaten. He deleted. And when deletion stopped working, he eliminated. Quietly. Strategically. Just like me. Except this time, I wasn't the one being erased. I was the one holding the outline. The draft of the story he didn't want told. So I opened a new document. Title: Internal routing schema, unreported transfers supporting witnesses. I typed 2 names. Mine. And Sophie Langston's. Then left space for more. Because patterns don't lie. They wait. And now, they had an audience. There's a moment in every collapse when the cracks stop being invisible. Not catastrophic. Not loud. Just undeniable. For me, it came in the form of a metadata log one Sophie Langston hadn't meant for anyone to find. A line of code in a version history.memofork3 draft 2.edited bs.langston. That memo had never gone public. It had never even made it to the board. But she had saved it. Proof that the original flagged the advisory payments and proof it had been overwritten. She wasn't hiding the truth. She was archiving it. So I took what she started and built a skeleton. First, I created a sandbox environment. Offline. No VPN. No sync. Every file duplicated twice, each version hash-locked and logged. I built a time-sequenced ledger, cross-referencing the advisory payments with fund liquidity windows. Anything that looked like a routine drawdown but didn't match the market context was tagged. I wasn't chasing headlines. I was building a story. One the SEC couldn't ignore. I didn't need to accuse Franklin. I just needed the numbers to speak. The hard part wasn't proof. It was narrative. There's a reason most fraud never makes it to trial, not because it isn't real, but because it isn't clear. White-collar crime hides in confusion. Bad actors depend on fatigue, on systems that collapse under their own bureaucracy. So I flattened it. Built a 4-page brief. Not 40. 1 summary page. 3 annexes. No adjectives. No editorial. 37 transfers. 5 entities. 2 relatives. 12.8 million. All routed through advisory shells to private trusts with familial links to executive leadership. I sent it from an encrypted mailbox. Recipient tipssec.gov. Subject: unreported conflicts and fraudulent routing, Bellington Chase. No name. No salutation. Just data. A week passed. Then another. Silence. Until the morning I received a call from a restricted number. I let it ring out. 15 minutes later, an email arrived from a Catherine Monroe, same as before. Only this time, it was addressed directly to me. Ms. Langley, I believe we should speak. Privately. Off the record. We met in a diner near DuPont Circle. 7:30 a.m. Quiet. No suits. She wore flats, carried a reusable coffee cup, and spoke like someone who had seen too many truths buried under PR statements. I've seen your brief, she said. I also received a separate document. Internal memo draft, someone named Sophie Langston? I nodded. She didn't send it. Monroe looked up. You did? No. She left it behind. Intentionally, I think. Was she terminated? Yes. Then you're not the only one who knows. That's when I started planning. Not hoping. Not guessing. Planning. I mapped my strategy in 5 columns: entity, transaction, beneficiary, paper trail, plausible denial. Each line was a node. Each anomaly, a window. I traced ownership records, cross-referenced address registrations, even paid for a reverse incorporation search on a consulting LLC that shared a phone number with a yoga studio in Santa Monica, the same studio Emma Pierce posted about on her Instagram. Franklin's daughter wasn't just adjacent. She was central. Which meant this wasn't negligence. It was deliberate. I needed protection. So I called an old law school contact, now a partner at a boutique whistleblower defense firm. We met in a park. No devices. He looked at me carefully before speaking. You're not naming yourself? No, you're walking the line between disclosure and retaliation? Yes. And if this leaks before SEC locks it? I disappear. He didn't smile. But he offered to vet the data for sealed submission under federal whistleblower protection. I agreed. That night, I backed up everything onto a device I physically mailed to his office. No cloud. No link. Just a USB in a padded envelope marked audit. Then I went silent. Publicly, at least. Privately, I went to work. I emailed 2 former colleagues I trusted, not about the fraud, but about project inconsistencies they might have observed. One responded vaguely. The other didn't at all. Until 5 days later. She called. No preamble. I know what this is. But I won't say it out loud. That was enough. Then the final trigger. An internal email forwarded anonymously from a BC insider. Subject: SEC Inquiry Prep Narrative Guidelines. The attachment outlined talking points. One line stood out: any anomalies flagged during previous audits were reviewed and deemed within acceptable parameters. No individual was terminated as a result of financial irregularities. It was dated the same week Sophie was fired. I forwarded the memo to Monroe. She replied in 2 words: got them. I wasn't expecting thanks. I wasn't even expecting justice. But I knew now this wasn't speculation. This was evidence. Franklin had spent years laundering money through the clean hands of trusted staff. And now, he had lost control of the narrative. Because someone remembered. Because someone wrote it down. The irony? They called me too diligent. Franklin once said it as a joke during a holiday party, drink in hand, before the board. This one, he said, gesturing to me, she could audit God. Everyone laughed. I didn't. Because I knew the truth then, too. I just hadn't written it down yet. In the days that followed, I stayed quiet. I avoided press. I ignored recruiter messages. And I prepared. For the storm I didn't start but wasn't afraid to walk through. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was architecture. The kind that collapses only when you pull the right beam. And I had just started pulling. It began quietly, just a whisper hidden in a small headline on page 4 of the Financial Ledger: SEC opens inquiry into Bellington Chase. No names, no quotes, just a vague sort, but that whisper became a wave. By noon, the story moved to the front page online. By evening, every Bloomberg terminal in Manhattan buzzed with the news. Inside the firm, confidence turned to static, then silence. I wasn't there. I'd already been wiped from internal systems. But whispers travel faster than emails. Caitlin, a junior analyst who once glanced at me during my exit, messaged they locked the drives. Legal's panicking. I watched from afar. Employees' heads down, executives leaving early, the lively lobby now a hushed chapel. And then I saw Franklin, same coat, same stride, but eyes cold, calculating. He thought he controlled the chaos. He didn't. The SEC made it official with a Monday notice investigation into fraud and unreported transactions. Emergency board meetings, weekly investor calls, suspensions. Franklin stayed silent publicly but tried to rewrite the story internally, claiming audits were clean, compliance engaged. Faith cracked. Trust faltered. Juniors stopped replying after hours. The firm was unraveling. A week later, Franklin's daughter, Emma Pierce, surfaced as a beneficiary of suspect transfers. This wasn't corporate error, it was personal corruption. An SEC contact warned me discovery was coming, protection offered. I'd done my part. Then, leaks flooded the firm: memos, emails revealing attempts to neutralize optics and delay disclosures. Half the compliance team quit. The board expressed concern, and Franklin released a stiff video denying wrongdoing, his voice breaking on integrity. I stayed silent, not hiding, but revealing. Others began speaking, exposing cover-ups and backdated audits. One day, a USB appeared on my Dorno sender. It held a recording Franklin, furious, vowing to burn everything rather than fall. I saved it but never sent it. The system was collapsing inward. 2 weeks later, federal injunction, asset freezes, IPO suspended, Franklin resigned without fanfare. I passed the building one last time, saw his name wiped away, his belongings packed, and a lavender folder the same color as one he'd once given me, but now no joke. Whispers about me grew. Franklin tried to reach out, calls, email, silence was my answer. That night, I brewed tea, opened the window, listened to the city breathe. I hadn't shouted or fought. I had simply followed the numbers, preserved the trail, and let the system collapse under its own weight. Justice isn't loud. It's quiet. It's slow. It's inevitable. 6 months later, I sat in a plain DC conference room, consulting on ethics, helping build systems that could no longer erase truth. The case against Bellington Chase moved slowly. Franklin avoided prison but not disgrace. Assets frozen. License revoked. Emma vanished online. 37 suspicious payments called unrecoverable anomalies. The firm survived new CEO, rebranding, cultural workshops. But who remembered what was lost? I declined interviews, let the mystery grow. Some thought I was Sophie Langston, some said a team. No one named me, and that was fine. One night, a handwritten letter arrived. I hope you find peace in what you did. No signature, but I knew the handwriting. It was Franklin's. He'd finally understood silence doesn't protect you when the system remembers. I don't feel vindicated. Justice is procedural, not satisfying. No apologies. No restitution. Only quiet shifts, new policies, stronger whistleblower protections, and audit teams taught that missing metadata is an alarm. A recruiter once offered me my old job. Same building, new name. I closed the email. I didn't want my old office. I wanted Agent Saito walk away, to choose when to speak or disappear, knowing the system no longer owned me. Sometimes, I open the ledger, the first red flag, the 2.4 million that started it all, not to read, but to remind myself that small fractures can bring down cathedrals. This was never revenge, not rage, not spectacle. Just a woman underestimated by a system that forgot how closely she watched. A whisper loud enough to echo through marble walls. When young analysts ask what to do when something feels wrong, I don't give laws, I ask questions. Who signed it? Who benefits? Who disappears when you ask? And most importantly, who's still watching when everyone else forgets? I became not a hero or whistleblower but a witness. The one who remembered. And in the end, that was enough. Because power doesn't fall with shouts, it erodes from within when silence finally speaks.